Among the major revelations, the U.S. Special Forces and support troops were on their own once the firefight began, on their own longer than previously thought.
About an hour after the initial contact was made, they requested support. When they requested support, it took the French aircraft. The French were ready to go in 30 minutes, and then it took them 30 minutes, approximately 30 minutes to get on the scene. So from that, I think it's a fair conclusion to say that about 2 hours after the initial contact was made, the initial French Mirages arrived overhead.
Now, why it took so long to call for help is part of the investigation. A White House official described Dunford's briefing as a deliberate effort to move past the heated rhetoric coming from all sides. But even with General Dunford's new details, many questions remain. CNN's Jim Sciutto was at the briefing. He has more from Washington.
Dave and Christine, unlike some administration officials since this deadly raid, General Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, came to the Pentagon briefing room and said every question about this from the public or from the families is justified, and he will do his best to answer every question he can. But fact is, they still can't answer many questions. He did clarify a few things. He said that this unit was returning to base when they were ambushed. They weren't going off on another mission. They weren't, he said, or he had no information that they went outside of their orders. He also said that they did not call in for air support until 1 hour into this firefight, and he said, or at least his assessment was, that that likely meant the commanders on the ground thought it was a firefight that they could handle. Of course, it didn't turn out that way, but there are still many questions that are unanswered. One, why was Sergeant LaDavid Johnson's body found 48 hours later, and why was it found a mile away from where the ambush took place? They don't know the answer to that question. They also don't know why the intelligence that was given to these soldiers was that it was unlikely that they would have enemy contact. I also asked him, do they know if the forces that evacuated both the wounded and the dead ever did a head count to make sure that everyone was accounted for? Again, a question they don't yet have an answer to. But I also asked him whether he would supply this information when they get answers to these questions. And General Dunford said without hesitation that yes, that he believes the military owes not only the family but the American public complete, in his words, transparency. Dave and Christine?
All right, Jim Sciutto, thank you for that, Jim. CNN has learned Pentagon officials will brief senators on the Armed Services Committee about the Niger ambush on Thursday. The chairman of that committee, Senator John McCain, says he is more satisfied now with the level of cooperation he is getting from the Defense Department. But he tells our Mani Raju significant questions about the operation remain.
What is still your biggest question that you have
after hearing about the whole operation? Come on, I have questions about it, why 4 men died. That's the question that most Americans want to know.
The White House pushing back after senators from both parties complained they had no idea how many U.S. troops were actually in Niger. The Trump administration insisting it notified congressional leaders in June about 965 troops conducting counter-terror operations in Niger and Cameroon.
Among the things that those soldiers are doing, building a drone base, among other things, and helping local armies there, and you know, to try to keep ISIS, Boko Haram, the radical Islamist terror that is taking root.
2,000, I think, across the country.
Right. Yeah. The White House hopes the controversy surrounding President Trump's condolence call to the widow of LaDavid Johnson is cooling after Democratic Congresswoman Frederica Wilson said the deadly ambush in Niger would be Trump's Benghazi. Joint Chiefs Chairman Joseph Dunford said this.
I personally see no utility in comparing this incident to any other incident. What's most important to me, aside from getting the facts, is identifying those things that we can do better in the future. And that's my focus.
Johnson's widow telling ABC Monday she was upset by the president's tone on the condolence call, and she says he stumbled over her husband's name. The president not taking the bait when questioned by reporters, though he got in one last dig on Twitter. We get more from CNN's Sarah Murray at the White House.
Good morning, Dave and Christine. President Trump was clearly eager on Monday to move beyond scrutiny over his condolence call to Maisha Johnson, the widow of a U.S. soldier who was killed in that military operation gone bad in Niger. President Trump avoided reporters' questions about that operation, as well as whether he had any additional sentiments to share with the widow, who said she was upset with the president's tone on the call. Now, Trump took to Twitter to insist he was respectful, but he dodged any efforts from reporters to get him to elaborate on that fact. The White House knows it needs to turn down the heat on this situation if it hopes to refocus on some of the president's other priorities, particularly tax reform. Today, he heads to Capitol Hill to meet with senators as he tries to sell his plan and ensure he can get at least one of his major legislative priorities through Congress. Back to you guys.
All right, Sarah Murray at the White House. Thanks, Sarah. President Trump vowing that tax reform won't touch your 401k. The president vowed this: no change to the retirement savings plan via tweet, adding that the tax break works and it stays. That contradicts several reports from the weekend. Republicans working on tax reform, they had been talking about reducing how much tax-free money workers can invest, capping contributions at $2,400 a year. The current limit is $18,000. Many popular deductions are on the chopping block. You have to have it on the chopping block, right? If you're going to pay for tax cuts, if you're going to do real tax reform. Despite Trump's pledge to the break is safe, this tax break is safe, his promises have not always become policy. Remember, he promised his plan would bring huge tax cuts for the middle class, yet the wealthy still get the biggest slice. He's also selling corporate tax cuts as a middle class raise. However, when you really look at these numbers here, foreign investors actually benefit more than the middle class from tax reform as it stands now. A new analysis found that $70 billion in corporate tax savings will end up overseas. That's 3 times the middle class tax relief for households under Trump's entire tax plan. Looks though as though the 401k is safe here. And the thing is that the 401k, people don't put enough in it in general.
Right.
And people are not saving enough. You're probably not saving enough for retirement, FYI. To take away the tax benefits of that was something that retirement planners were really worried about.
Something's got to give. You have to raise some revenue.
Yep.
This has to be deficit neutral over 10 years.
Yep.
If you get it through on reconciliation.
How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it?
This is going to be difficult. All right, a big step in the return to normalcy for parts of Puerto Rico. Public school classes set to resume this morning for the first time in over a month. Some great news. Students return in 2 cities, San Juan and Mayaguez. A total of 109 school campuses reopening today out of the more than 1,100 on the island. Many school buildings remain damaged or occupied as shelters, and roads in some areas are still impassable.
The Senate has advanced a large disaster relief bill to respond to a rash of recent hurricanes. Most of that money, over $18 billion, goes to FEMA's disaster relief program. Another $16 billion earmarked for the National Flood Insurance Program. Additional funds designated